Friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rainy, and today we are going to talk about my October Victober wrap up. I had a really good reading month last month, which was great because I feel like most of this year has been kind of slumpy for me. So I had a really great reading month. I didn't, of course, read everything that was on my TBR, but that's okay. So anyway, let's just get right into it because I'm on my lunch break and I should try to get this done quickly. Normally in Victober, I basically read nothing but Victorian literature. But this month, I actually read a couple of things that were not Victorian literature related. So we'll talk about those first. The first book that I read was Harvest Moon Misfortune by London Lovett. This is the fifth book in the Frostfall Island mystery series, and I'm on the ARC team for this book, so it just recently came out, I believe at the beginning of this month. And this follows Anna St. James, who is a boarding house owner on Frostfall Island. And that really lends itself to being really fun with the cast of characters because she has a boarding house full of housemates, basically, and they all help her solve the crimes on the island. They aren't really like actively involved, but she runs her theories by them and they give her information if they just happen to come across it, that kind of thing. So it's really interesting and they're all really fun and heartwarming. There's a little bit of a historical personal side mystery involved, which I really enjoy. The Port Danby series by London Lovett was my first foray into London's books, and that had a historical mystery involved in it too. So I really like that she continues to do that with this series. And I think she does it with a few other series too, but I have to catch up in all of those. But in this one, we have a Harvest Moon celebration on Frostfall Island, and it's become a really big deal, and fancy, rich yachting people come and park their boats on the island for the festival. And one such yacht owner ends up getting himself killed. And Anna, who is kind of a self-imposed or island imposed detective on the island, because there's no on the island police force. They have to ship in a guy from the mainland who tends to be kind of a jerk. um, she ends up being the one to kind of solve the mysteries, basically. So I generally have said that I like it better when the police that come in aren't like jerks or incompetent. But in this case, I don't mind it because he kind of comes in, does his jerky thing and leaves, and then it's just basically the Frostfall people. So I feel like I can handle it that way because they're not constantly getting in the way. Um, so yeah, I enjoy this one despite the incompetent detective aspect because he's not there that much, honestly. But yeah, so I really enjoyed this. And if you have not read any of London Lovett's books yet, I really encourage you to pick this one up because this is only number 5, so you could catch up really quick. The other non-Victober related book that I read was Ramona The Pest, and I'm reading this with my friend Angie from Angie and the Great World and formerly Literary Labors, and a few other friends of ours. And it's just a fun little nostalgic read. It follows Ramona and her sister Beezus, and Ramona is the younger sister, and she is definitely a pest. And I don't think I could deal with her as my sister. But it's fun to read all of her antics, and I'm sure as a kid, I do remember reading this book as a kid, and I'm sure as a kid I just thought it was hilarious, all the things that she got up to. As an adult, I find it funny, but also a little tedious because I just think like, oh my gosh, all the adults that have to deal with this kid. But it's really cute. So we're going to continue with the series. And I don't honestly know if I ever continued with the series as a kid after Ramona the Pest. So we'll see if I remember anything more. But yeah, there's not much to say about this one. It's just a fun little nostalgic read. So let's get to the Victober books. The first two things that I read were by the same author, Jerome K. Jerome, and I reread Three Men in a Boat by him, and this one I buddy read with Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia and Dia from Novel Idea, and this is just fun too. It's a comedic novel about three men and their dog who decide to take a trip down the Thames in a boat, and just all the things that they get up to on this trip. And they have just like little side tangents of like memories that they have along the way that don't necessarily always make sense with the rest of the novel, but it was just fun. And it was fun to read it with Tiffany and Dia, because Dia, every time she would leave a message on Voxer, would just be cracking up at what happened in that previous section. So it just made it that much more fun to reread it and experience it with friends this time. And then the second thing I read by Jerome K. Jerome was A Prude's Progress, and that is a play. And I got to read this with a bunch of friends on Kate Howe's Patreon. And this is like the best way to do it. Honestly, if you have to read a play or want to read a play, get some friends to like read it out loud with you, because it is hilarious that way. And this one was just typical Jerome K. Jerome, funny style, but like with some social commentary thrown in. We follow a man who is like a highly prized like Christian political figure, and he has a wife, and he's very into like the temperance movement and everything. And then we find out some not so savory things in his past, and just all the things that ensue from finding out his deep, dark secrets. So I won't give it away in case you want to read it, but it is really funny. And I feel like even though to me, the whole like Christian, high figure, or, what's the word? Like famous Christian downfall kind of thing is kind of a tired thing to me. This was Victorian times, so maybe that wasn't a big thing back then. It's become very tired to me now, but I'm not going to be offended by it. It is what it is. And yeah, it was just very good. I enjoyed it. And it was great reading it with Kate's Patreon. So yeah, I highly recommend it. I think I'm going to tell a local theater group that they should do it because it would be hilarious. And the next thing I read was Salem Chapel by Margaret Oliphant, and I buddy read this with my friend Joe, and this is part of the Chronicles of Carlingford by Margaret Oliphant, and I think this is like the third or fourth. I always forget to check. But up until the point of Salem's Chapel, it has just been, a cozy domestic type of series. But in Salem Chapel, it goes off the rails and becomes a sensation novel, which was fun, definitely. But it started off for like a few chapters at least as just the same old, domestic coziness. We follow a new vicar in the town, and it just starts going through him getting to know his parishioners, and they are kind of needy and demanding. So there's like that little bit of drama involved, but then something happens in his personal life with his family, and it just becomes this sensation novel right in like smack dab in the middle of the story. And I would say that and Joe said this too, like we did not enjoy the main character, and weren't really rooting for him uh, enough for the length of this novel. um, and it was just like so crazy for most of it, but just his personality just really got on our nerves throughout the whole thing, because this whole thing with his family that was happening, I'm trying not to be spoilery, but this whole thing with his family that was going on, uh you would think as a vicar he would have handled it differently. But I don't know if we were supposed to see this as like his spiritual crisis and that he wasn't really cut out for being a pastor or what, because that was like kind of a thread throughout the story. But it just was like I don't even know if a person who cared about his family who wasn't a vicar would have reacted the way he did to a lot of things. So we were kind of glad when the story finally ended. I enjoyed it just because I do enjoy the plot-driven sensation novel type thing. But I think if it had gone on any longer, I would have been over it, because I just did not care for him as a character, and he was like the main guy that you were supposed to root for. So yeah, but it was fun, and we're excited to continue on with the rest of the series, and I feel like it's going to go back to being just a domestic kind of cozy series, and she won't be throwing in much more sensation novel stuff in the middle of it. And then the next thing that I read was just a short story by Elizabeth Gaskell called Mr. Harrison's Confessions. And this one I would say was not my favorite Gaskell that I've ever read. I really enjoy all of her novels, but her short stories have been hit or miss with me. I was hoping that this would be a little bit more uh, like Cranford, because I really enjoyed Cranford. And it was to a point, but it was kind of dull, to be honest. The last third of it, though, was a lot more interesting. There was some romance and some, misunderstandings about the romance involved, and it was funnier towards the end. It felt like in the last third or something, she kind of hit her stride with it. But for such a short story, because even this length of it was only 100 pages, and my font is really big in this copy, so it probably really wasn't even 100 pages in reality. So yeah, it was just a lot of the new doctor in town going to meet a bunch of people, and then all of a sudden like things started going wrong. But it was not until like the last third of the book that there was any like real action or drama. So it was, I gave it 3 stars because I did enjoy the last bit of it. But it just took me for as long as it took me a long time to finish it. And then the last thing that I read was The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope, which was the group read for Victober. And I actually finished this one, though, on November 1st. But, I read it all of Victober, so I'm counting it off my Victober TBR, or wrap up. So this one was a bit of a slow start for me. It was very, very long, but it was a slow start for me. But then once we kind of got to know more of the characters and things started happening, it got a lot more interesting. None of the male characters, except one, were anybody that I would really root for. They all just were kind of wishy-washy, or just downright terrible, or just like little man children. It was just, they were bad. But it was definitely almost like Trollope was trying to make them that way, as like a caricature or like a social commentary on young people in the gentry or whatever at the time. So it was good. I ended up really liking most of the plot lines. The way they ended were satisfactory to me. So, but and a lot of the female characters I really enjoyed reading about, but I didn't so much like any of the men. They were all pretty horrible, except for one. There was one bright shining star in the male characters, but yeah, sadly, he wasn't like a main focus of most of the plot lines. So, oh well. But it was still good, and I think I gave it 4 stars in the end. So the things that I'm still reading from my Victober TBR are Man and Wife by Wilkie Collins. I just started this one too late. I was supposed to read this for Kate Howe's Patreon, but I just didn't start it on time, so I didn't get it finished before the meeting. But it is really good, and it's fast paced. It's definitely a sensation novel, so I'm finding that I really do enjoy those. So I'm planning to finish it hopefully within the next week. So yeah, it started off with a bang though. It was not like Salem Chapel. It started off sensation novel. Like there was no denying that this was a sensation novel right from the start. But I will talk more about that whenever I get it done, because I just haven't read it in a few days, so I need kind of a little refresher as to what it's all about. And lastly, Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. I'm reading this with my friend Alicia, and we just knew we weren't going to get it done in October, so we're just taking our time with it. And it's this one again, slow start for me. A lot of the things that I read this month were slow starts, but they got better. So I'm hopeful that Little Dorrit will get better, because I've been really looking forward to this one for a long time. And so I was like, for about 5 chapters or so, I was like, is this how this is going to be the whole time? But it's starting to pick up a little bit, so I'm hopeful. All right, friends, I am going to get going because I am on my lunch break and I actually haven't eaten yet. And I don't know if you could hear it, but my stomach's been growling the entire time I've been making this video. So I'm going to go grab something to eat and get back to work. And I hope you all had a great Victober or October if you don't participate in Victober. And I hope you have some great things planned for November. And I will talk to you in my next video. Bye, friends.